Hello and welcome to Yesteryear's Mac Peripherals, where today we're taking a look at what was the most prominent hard disk-based cartridge backup solution of the mid-90s and early noughties. A sister product to the immensely popular zip drive, Imega's Jazz product line, which kicked off in 1996, was their attempt to replicate the zip drive's success in the higher-end, high-capacity storage market. It wasn't the runaway success Imega were hoping for, but shifted enough units for the product to be supported up until 2002. The direct replacement from Imega for the Jazz was the Rev drive, although in practice, users predominantly migrated to writable CDs. Today, Jazz disks and drives are largely derided as a flawed technology that was unfit for the task it was designed to perform. We'll explore that later on, but for now, let's take a neb over the products themselves. An external 1GB Jazz drive has the same footprint as Imega's Zip and Ditto drives. It's a little longer than a Zip, and the case is stylized in a similar manner. It's worth pointing out that there were also some licensed drive manufacturers, such as Micronet, who made their own versions, some of which were actually multiple drives and enabled RAID 0 and 1 configurations. Anyway, the dark green plastic will have contrasted quite starkly against computer equipment of the day, and featured a flap at the front for cartridge insertion, an eject button next to that, rubber feet to help keep it still as the disc inside rotated at 5,400 RPM, and two 50-pin SCSI B ports on the back, alongside controls for the termination settings and SCSI ID. For those not in the know, SCSI is short for Small Computer System Interface, and was built into all Macs from the Macintosh Plus of 1986 up to the beige G3s of 97. Not all of these DB25 ports are equal. Higher-end Macs did tend to have faster versions of SCSI, but if I attempted to elaborate on that, we'd be here for ages. The key thing here is that SCSI is significantly faster than the serial and parallel ports of their era, and so this interface was a good choice for high-capacity drives. Imega claimed the Jazz had a 5.4 megabits per second average transfer rate, although real-world performance was typically slightly over 3. Enhanced parallel ports, in comparison, could only manage about 2, while serial allegedly shuffled along at a pedestrian 150 kilobytes per second. The cartridges themselves are a tad thicker than a zip disk, a smidgen thinner than 3 floppy disks, and the breadth and depth of my living room PC. Stickers for writing on exist on the top and the side, while the front bit that enters the drive first features a thin metal strip that opens up so the drive heads may access the hard disk platter. There's a small notch here that snags on something as it's inserted into the drive to enable this to happen. If one should want the platters inside to remain as contaminant-free as possible, this tab shouldn't be fiddled with. Furthermore, it was recommended by Imega that the cartridges are returned to their protective box when not in use, to further minimise any crud getting in. This one's already gone bad, so I don't mind opening it up. 2 platters then, and a substantial mechanism for where the motor attaches to the bottom. Unless a user had a high-speed SCSI add-in card, getting this connected to a Mac required a cable that could plug into a DB25 or HDI 30. Make sure the device is switched on before booting the Mac, and refrain from inserting a disk until the boot sequence is well underway, in case the Mac tries to find a system folder on the Jazz disk, instead of where it should be looking. I have to say, I do like the sound it makes as it spins a cart up. Imega's blurb on the unit's noise stated that it featured anti-rattle technology, whatever that is, and that it makes under 42 decibels when in use. Reviews at the time stated the unit was quieter than other competing external hard disk solutions, but by today's standards, it's still pretty noisy. Getting a cartridge to mount on a Mac means installing the drivers and Imega's Tools application. To get it on my 630 here, I've plugged in an Ethernet cable and typed in the application's download link on the Macintosh Garden to download directly to the desktop. There are a few different versions to choose from. 4.3, which you can see here, offers compatibility with older machines, but it's missing functionality that later revisions came with. A key one is the ability to look at a cartridge's health, which is pretty useful information. That came with version 6, while the edition on my main street is newer still and able to create bootable recovery disks without the use of another program. This is blisteringly simple to do. After setting it off, the drive does a low-level format on the inserted cart, which takes 18 or so minutes, and then whacks a copy of the computer's system folder and disk first aid on it. A user can then select the Jazz disk in the Startup Disk control panel and reboot in order to do some disk repairs on the main drive. It boots a lot faster than it can from a recovery CD. 1GB was a lot of space for 1996, and more than my Performer originally shipped with, although it has since been upgraded. In an attempt to fill a cart up, I decided to copy my entire games folder onto one. It took 18 minutes to noisily transfer just over 700 megabytes of things. You can hear it here. After this, I was then able to play some of them off the Jazz cart without any hitches. I tried Space Junkie and an Oxide game on the 630 before putting the same cart in my main street and trying some on there. To try and push it a bit harder, I installed Quake onto another one and removed the install CD to be sure it wasn't reading from that. And this is the result: speedy load times and smooth movement. Nice. It plays back video files nicely enough as well. I had this screen recording of Mario Kart 8 sat around from my Apple Video System hands-on, and was able to play it back and jump to various points on it on the Jazz Drive with no pauses or loss of quality, overplaying it from the hard disk. The NAF frame rate is the recording itself. Benchmarks done by Macworld magazine showed it frequently outperformed a proper hard drive, although the claims stopped short of being able to perform live video capture, which this review highlighted. So this is all pretty positive stuff. On paper, it sounds like a fantastic product, so why the lousy reputation? Well, I've had one of these drives with a dead disk doing nothing for somewhat over a year now, so I bid on an auction for 4 more, and after chatting with the seller, ended up with about 26. After testing half, my drive had managed to detect about 4, and only successfully format 1, which it then couldn't read afterwards. This was a bit off, so I ended up buying another drive. Turned out the first one was bad. It transpired that all of these disks bar one needed reformatting before they could be used. It knew there was data on them, but it couldn't quite figure out what it was. Iomega reckoned the service life of a format was about 5 years, while the ultimate shelf life of a cartridge was 10. Failure rate turned out to be higher than this, and after numerous users inserted their work one morning and found it couldn't be read, they will have gotten understandably upset, and no doubt very vocal about it. Now, I don't know enough about this to say for certain, but I believe the unreliability is at least in part what happens when hard drive platters are exposed to the elements, hence why in conventional spinning rust, the platter is entombed within a shell. As things get in and screw sectors up by sitting on them, the format life of the disk falls. So formatting the disk would only work for so long before the cartridge needed replacing. If, like the previous owner of most of these disks, someone had a lot of them and cycled them for a month-by-month backup, it wouldn't have been a problem, as the oldest backup would be reformatted every time it was used, staying on top of bad sectors. If, however, a user didn't have an enterprise budget for equipment, this process of degradation could potentially render important data unreadable. Now, let's address the most prominent symptom of a bad cart: the click of death. This refers to a rapid insertion and removal of the drive's heads as it tries to find an opening track on a disk in order to mount it. I heard this on a few of the failed carts, and naturally got a bit concerned. I mean, click of death. It doesn't sound awfully pleasant now, does it? So a bit of digging around was necessary to find out a bit more. If there is clicking, a disk can't be read. As users had important information on these things, they would most likely get into a bit of a flap, and immediately try the disk on another drive. A general misunderstanding is that the click will transmit itself to anything that is used with anything that has been infected, potentially then ruining all the drives in an entire office as people frantically try everything with everything to get something to work. Iomega didn't help things by employing the most basic of damage control strategies and refusing to acknowledge that there was a problem. Doing this probably made business sense, as admitting there was a major flaw in the flagship product could well have destroyed sales. I bumped into a very extensive write-up on the subject from Gibson Research Corporation, which I'll try and summarise. The link's in the description. It's interesting stuff and worth a read. Firstly, the click itself is deliberate. While it was a last resort action, this was within design parameters, as it recalibrates the head's position, scrubs it to remove excessive oxide deposits, and discharges any built-up electrostatic. It would seem that with the rare exception of a physically damaged disk that can rip off the read-write heads, that's zip only, the click of death would appear to not actually be contagious. Disks written to by a bad drive can't be read by anything, hence why they all click when one's inserted. Iomega's silence on the matter thus enabled rumours and fear-mongering to percolate, so third-party tools, such as the application that GRC offers, called Trouble in Paradise, can identify the warning signs of a drive going bad and recover garbled disks. So, while a click of death does signal the end of whatever data is present, preventative measures can be taken to mitigate this risk. So is it worth picking up a Jazz drive and some disks today, just to mess about with, or back up an old machine? Well, I do have a backup of a couple of my ones on Jazz disks now, but honestly, I don't expect these to ever be of use. I just did it for the novelty factor. This sort of hardware is pretty fun to play with, and having gotten all the equipment at a good price, I'd say it's been worth it. A user, however, really shouldn't rely on these to hold data that isn't duplicated somewhere else. It really wasn't reliable enough back when the hardware was new, let alone now. Those looking to buy should probably avoid listings where the seller has been unable to test the equipment, as there is a higher than usual chance of it not working. Cartridges without a protective box are almost guaranteed to be bad, and should be avoided too. Aside from that, check it's got the right SCSI cable, and that your equipment has the right port, and everything should go tickety-boo. So that'll do it for this edition of YY's MG, although I'm not quite done with backup stuff yet. This Jazz video was originally going to be part of something else before I decided to spin it off. So, if you're watching a month or so after this went live, the follow-up will be on one of these end cards. Do pop your thoughts, memories, opinions, corrections, and general abuse in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to avoid missing future content. Thanks for watching then, and see you next time.